The Vietnam War, a brutal conflict, left an indelible mark on the 20th century. It deeply divided the United States and had profound consequences for Southeast Asia. The war's legacy continues to shape international relations and serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. Understanding the Vietnam War is essential for comprehending the complexities of the 20th century. At the heart of the Vietnam War lay a divided nation, Vietnam. The North, led by the communist leader Ho Chi Minh, sought to reunify the country under a single communist regime. The South, supported by the United States, fought to prevent the spread of communism. The United States, driven by Cold War fears and the domino theory, became increasingly entangled in the conflict, ultimately taking on a major combat role. The Soviet Union and China, on the other hand, provided military and economic aid to North Vietnam, further fueling the conflict. The Viet Cong, a communist guerrilla force operating in South Vietnam, played a crucial role in the war. They employed guerrilla tactics, blending in with the civilian population and launching surprise attacks on U.S. and South Vietnamese forces. To understand the Vietnam War, one must delve into Vietnam's history of colonialism and the rise of Ho Chi Minh. For centuries, Vietnam had been ruled by foreign powers, including China and France. French colonialism in particular left a deep scar on the Vietnamese psyche. Ho Chi Minh, a charismatic leader inspired by communist ideology, emerged as a symbol of Vietnamese nationalism and resistance against foreign rule. He led the Viet Minh, a communist-led independence movement, against the French in the First Indochina War. The First Indochina War culminated in the French defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The Geneva Accords that followed temporarily divided Vietnam along the 17th parallel, with Ho Chi Minh's communist forces controlling the north and a U.S.-supported government in the south. The Vietnam War unfolded against the backdrop of the Cold War, a period of intense rivalry and ideological conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. The U.S., driven by the domino theory, feared that the fall of Vietnam to communism would lead to the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia. This fear, coupled with a desire to contain the spread of Soviet influence, led to increasing U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Initially, U.S. support for South Vietnam was primarily economic and military aid. However, as the conflict escalated, the U.S. gradually increased its military presence. President Dwight D. Eisenhower's domino theory held that if one country in a region fell to communism, neighboring countries would follow suit. This theory, though widely debated, played a significant role in shaping U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War. Section 5. Escalation. The Gulf of Tonkin and the Americanization of the war. The Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964 marked a turning point in the Vietnam War. Following alleged attacks on U.S. Navy destroyers by North Vietnamese torpedo boats, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, authorizing President Lyndon B. Johnson to take all necessary measures to repel further aggression. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution effectively gave President Johnson a blank check to escalate U.S. involvement in Vietnam. U.S. military involvement rapidly increased, with troop levels soaring in what became known as the Americanization of the war. The U.S. military strategy in Vietnam relied heavily on air power, search and destroy missions, and attrition warfare. The goal was to inflict heavy casualties on the enemy and erode their will to fight. However, the U.S. military faced significant challenges in Vietnam, including the difficult terrain, the elusive nature of the Viet Cong, and the growing unpopularity of the war at home. Section 6. Turning Points, the Tet Offensive and Shifting Public Opinion. The Tet Offensive, launched by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army in January 1968, was a major turning point in the Vietnam War. Though a military defeat for the Communists, the Tet Offensive had a profound psychological impact on the United States. The Tet Offensive shattered the perception that the U.S. was winning the war and fueled growing anti-war sentiment at home. The images of fighting in the streets of Saigon, previously considered relatively safe, shocked the American public and eroded support for the war. The Tet Offensive exposed the credibility gap between the Johnson administration's optimistic assessments of the war and the reality on the ground. It led to a loss of confidence in the government and fueled the growing anti-war movement. Section 7. A nation divided: protests and the anti-war movement. As the Vietnam War dragged on, it became increasingly divisive in the United States. Anti-war protests, initially small and scattered, grew in size and intensity. College campuses became hotbeds of activism, with students organizing teach-ins, demonstrations, and draft resistance movements. The anti-war movement drew support from a diverse coalition of students, civil rights activists, clergy, and ordinary citizens who questioned the war's morality, cost, and impact on American society. Iconic images of protesters confronting police, burning draft cards, and chanting anti-war slogans became synonymous with the era. The anti-war movement reflected a deep division within American society over the war. It challenged the government's authority, sparked a national debate about the limits of presidential power, and left a lasting legacy on American political culture. Section 8. The Fall of Saigon, U.S. Withdrawal, and the War's End. By the early 1970s, the U.S. public had grown weary of the Vietnam War. The Nixon administration, seeking to extricate the U.S. from the conflict, pursued a policy of Vietnamization, gradually withdrawing U.S. troops and turning over responsibility for the fighting to the South Vietnamese. The Paris Peace Accords, signed in January 1973, officially ended U.S. involvement in the war. However, fighting continued between North and South Vietnam. In April 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, marking the end of the war. The fall of Saigon was a chaotic and tragic event, with thousands of South Vietnamese fleeing the country, fearing reprisals from the victorious communists. The war's end left Vietnam unified under communist rule, but it also left a legacy of devastation, division, and displacement. Section 9. Legacy of War Scars, Lessons, and the Enduring Human Cost. The Vietnam War cast a long shadow over the United States and Southeast Asia. It led to the loss of millions of lives, devastated the Vietnamese countryside, and left deep scars on both the victors and the vanquished. The war's legacy continues to shape international relations and serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. For the United States, the Vietnam War was a costly and divisive experience that forced a reckoning with the limits of American power and the complexities of foreign intervention. It left a legacy of skepticism towards military interventionism and a heightened awareness of the importance of public opinion in shaping foreign policy. The Vietnam War also had profound consequences for Southeast Asia, leading to political upheaval, economic instability, and the rise of new conflicts. The war's legacy continues to shape the political landscape of the region and serves as a reminder of the enduring human cost of conflict.